Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. And since this book is massive, I'm going to be putting it down because otherwise I don't think I can get through this video. Don Quixote was written by Miguel de Cervantes in the early 1600s. There's actually two parts of the book. There's a part 1 and a part 2, which was published 10 years after the first. This edition that I have on my shelf is translated by Edith Grossman, but obviously it's been hundreds of years and there's tons of translations out there. This is one that was recommended to me and I really enjoyed it. Before I bought it, I went to the bookstore and I kind of compared different editions that they had, and I did really like this translation. I have wanted to read this book for years and years, and it's just been one of those books that has so much critical acclaim. The fact that it's written by a Hispanic, the fact that it's considered the first modern novel, and that it had such an impact on the literary world. For some reason, that plus the 900 or so pages really intimidated me and it kept me from picking it up, but I decided to just go for it, and I made it into a kind of read-along, and I made a Goodreads group for it, which I think really helped. I also made sure to kind of divide up the book into 30 pages a night, and so it took me about a month to finish the entire story. So I think the fact that I kind of broke it down like that and also did kind of a buddy read really helped me, and I am planning to do that with a lot of larger classics in the future. The story is really about a man named Don Quixote de la Mancha who is a farmer, and he starts reading all these stories about knighthoods, which were really popular at the time in the early 1600s. He's read so many of these that he has, I don't know if it's because he's gone a little crazy or has a midlife crisis or something, but he decides that he's going to be a knight, and it doesn't matter if he's not like your typical knight. He is going to live like a knight to the best of his ability. So he kind of recruits his neighbor Sancho Panza to be his squire, and together they hop on his donkey and they go off in search of adventures. That's essentially the story. Miguel de Cervantes really wanted to poke fun at all of these knighthood stories that were really popular at the time, and so this really reads like a parody with a lot of heart. So in the first part of the book, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza go on a bunch of ridiculous adventures, things that really are just funny to read about, things that would never happen. And the fact that Don Quixote seems to be a little delusional / crazy just makes it all the more fun. And then you have Sancho Panza, who is kind of half-witted in his own right and kind of believes everything that Don Quixote tells him, and they get into some serious trouble and survive by a miracle, really. So the first part I personally really enjoyed. I thought reading 30 pages a day was kind of the best way to tackle that, because I kind of felt like I was reading a new adventure, or or one or two a week, and that kept me interested, and it was just a lot of funny moments that had me shaking my head and laughing out loud, which doesn't happen often, but Don Quixote is just so ridiculous, and Sancho Panza is such an enabler that you really do feel like you kind of know a Don Quixote or a Sancho Panza somewhere in your life, and that kind of adds to the reading experience. Part 2 is kind of the same, except that Miguel de Cervantes writes part 2 as if you, the reader, have already heard about Don Quixote from part 1, and all the characters in the story have heard of Don Quixote. It's assumed that all the characters in part 2 have read part 1. So Don Quixote has kind of a reputation now, and this time they cross paths with like a prince and a princess who have heard of both of them and have decided to kind of play with both of them. And that aspect of the story, it made me not enjoy part 2 as much as part 1. I actually, sitting here after I read both parts, I actually think that Miguel de Cervantes should have just stopped at part 1. I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion because I try not to read reviews or watch videos about this book. I didn't want to be swayed in any way, and just, you know, sitting here honestly, I can say that part 1 was enough for me, and part 2 kind of felt like I think Miguel de Cervantes wanted to prove a point with part 2 since part 1 was so popular, and I guess he could read everybody's criticisms and thoughts on the story. It's almost like he wanted to have the last word with part 2, and I didn't really enjoy the aspect of, you know, Don Quixote and Sancho being ridiculed by other characters. I don't know if it's ironic to say that I kind of wanted to be the only one that was making fun of them. I didn't really want other people in the story to be making fun of them or taking advantage of them. For some reason, I guess it's because when I was making fun of them as I read, it wasn't with like malice or bad intentions, but I felt like these characters kind of took it too far. So that kind of took me out of the story. I'm trying not to give too much away, but not be too vague, which is a lot harder than it sounds. But I definitely don't want to discourage anybody from reading this book because I do think it's an important literary piece. I think it's amazing that Miguel de Cervantes was able to write something so original at the time and something that has made such an impact that you can kind of see his methods and his style kind of being used over time and still influencing works today. For that alone, I think it's worth reading. However, me personally, I have a feeling that I'll be rereading part 1 in the future because I enjoyed it so much. So I definitely want to try other books that have intimidated me in the past, specifically Russian literature. I have yet to read something by one of the Russian greats, and so breaking it up like I did and doing a buddy read, I think will be a method that I use in the future and really helped me a lot. So those are my thoughts on Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. If you've read the book or participated in the buddy read, please leave a comment down below. I'll be responding to comments and we can talk a little bit more about the book down there. If you're interested, I'll also have the Goodreads group linked down in the description box so you guys can go check out kind of my thoughts and other people's thoughts as we were reading the book. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.